he said, be more courageous. So since that moment, I've been using that, just be more courageous. And being more courageous from this team of teams type thing is actually saying, can we get 2 teams in the room together? Can we get 3 teams in the room together? And actually, instead of making it a paper type exercise, actually getting people in the room together. And I have one example whereby I had 2 teams in a room together, and one was external to the organization, one was internal. And they said they made more progress in 3 hours in 3 years.
Welcome to the Product Agility Podcast, the missing link between agile and product. The purpose of this podcast is to share practical tips, strategies, and stories from world-class thought leaders and practitioners. Why, I hear you ask? Well, I want to increase your knowledge and your motivation to experiment so that together we can create ever more successful products. My name is Ben Maynard and I'm your host. What has driven me for the last decade to bridge the gap between agility and product is a deep-rooted belief that people and products evolving together can achieve mutual excellence.
Hello and welcome back to the Product Agility Podcast, the 4th episode of 2025, I believe. And now that's the purpose information is out of the way. I am once again over the moon to be joined by some excellent guests. Guests who I have known now for a deceptively long amount of time, I think. Now that I actually think about it. Because we're joined by Lucy Widdowson and Paul Barbour, authors of a fantastic team coaching book, which we will be sharing more information about as we go through, and the people that took me through my professional team coaching journey at Henley Business School. So it's, this is definitely me feeling like a student again, being presented with 2 people who are far more intelligent and have a much deeper and richer experience in team coaching than I will ever have. You can shake your heads, but it's true. It's true. I am the student and you are the teachers, and it's great to have you on the podcast. Lucy and Paul, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben. Great to be here.
So we're going to start this conversation by looking at teams, and that's going to be the focus of most of the conversation. But before we really go into, I suppose, some of the problems with teams, some of the opportunities around teams, and some of our feelings around teams, would you mind giving our listeners a brief introduction to yourselves?
Paul, you can go first.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Paul Barbour. I am from Northern Ireland, so I'll try and speak slowly so you can understand me, all of your listeners. And I am really passionate about human beings collaborating. I come from a background whereby we didn't collaborate during the Troubles, and when I had a peace process. I'm just really passionate at individual level, within family and within teams, and at a societal level, how can we collaborate better? And that's my passion in life. So I'm really delighted to be here, Ben, and I'm great to reunite in this platform. So, and Lucy?
Thank you, Paul. So I live in Horsham in West Sussex, come from London, and personally, so 3 big kids, 2 of whom have flown the nest, and then one still at uni. And probably what's driven me to love this work is actually there was some conflict in my home life, in my family life when I was younger. And I think that's sort of drawn me to want to get people to connect and collaborate better. And so that's why I absolutely love doing this work. And so like Paul, a team coach, been doing it for such a long time, 25 years or so, and also really love developing people to be team coaches as well. So I think we get really excited about seeing other people grow and be successful team coaches. That really inspires us. So, and obviously Ben said he was on one of the programs we tutored, so it was brilliant to have you, Ben.
Oh, thank you. I mean, how many years ago was that now?
A few.
Was that?
Yeah,
4. I can't remember. I don't know.
I think it might be 4 years. I think.
Could well
years
be.
just seem to. They all seem to. Yeah.
It's phenomenal. Do you know what? I kind of miss going to Henley Business School. I like the whole
place.
Just going there for the weekend, to learn, but then to kind of hang out with really like-minded people, to be an amazing environment. It's so beautiful around there.
Yeah,
Absolutely beautiful.
It's not too far away from my house. It takes a couple of hours to get there, so I enjoyed the train journey. I just enjoyed the whole experience. So I would love to go back there one day.
There's other courses, So there's always.
Absolutely.
Oh,
So I've gone back both as obviously we as tutors, but I've also gone back as a student as well, and it was fantastic.
I remember I got a certificate I got invited to a graduation ceremony, not realizing that I was entitled to do such a thing. Because I did the executive coaching course and your course, I achieved some level of something or another. I was like, oh, this is a surprise to me. Maybe I will continue and I'll get to the masters one day, but that'll be for maybe I'll do that next week. But what you were saying there, thank you for sharing that, kind of what led you to this environment. I think it's fantastic, and it has given me some really some ideas and some maybe questions that we could ask as we go through. But let's stick to the script, because I think that the term team for many, I think without realizing, has become jargon. I think it's probably one of the most overused words, particularly in the corporate environment. And I think that any collection of humans trying to do something poorly or doing it well, or however they've been working, however they're interacting, seems to have been classed a team, even though they never get the real benefit. They never deliver upon that promise of value that teams has been set up to achieve. So what I'm really intrigued by, Paul and Lucy, is from your perspectives, what is a team?
Yeah, good question. Important question. One that probably still people grapple with as well. So a team is more than two people. Paul and I were a team, and we've been writing as well. And if you look at some of the literature, it's all about that, they've got a collective purpose, that, they exist together, and that there are some interdependencies as well within the team. So there's some connection across the team as well. But in essence, it's really about what's the work that they can do together more effectively that they can't do apart. And that's often what we say to teams, isn't it, Paul? We just say, so what is that? What is that work you can do together you can't do apart? Why do you exist together? And a conversation we'll probably be even having again tomorrow with a team that we're working with, because they've been exploring that. Paul, you might have something to add.
Yeah, a lot of teams, as you say, Ben, the word is used, and the question is it a real team? Is it a real team? And we have that conversation a lot with teams. To what extent is this a team? And based on what Lucy's saying there, interdependency, joint work product, how you reward it. A lot of organizations, they say they have a team and then they reward all these individuals. So actually what they're doing, they're rewarding, as what's the word, on collaboration. That's a really bad word. But they say we want you to work together, but we reward you separately for your functions. And we always ask that question, how is this team rewarded together as well? That doesn't mean you can't reward separately, but how is a team rewarded together as well? It's really interesting. It's a massive topic that we have with every single team we work with. We ask the question, to what extent is this a real team?
And I think there's a few things to unpick there. I mean, the rewards, I think that's something that I'd like to come back to as well, because that's such a problem. And I was always just flabbergasted in the organisations where I worked as a permanent member of staff. Everyone spoke a great game when it came to teams, but I never ever saw a single team rewarded for being a team by the official corporate mechanisms.
I have experienced that. I have experienced it, and I've experienced it when we've moved from individual functional reward to complete collective reword. And actually that was a bit discombobulating as well for people,
Yeah. No, and I'd love to try and unpick that. But then one thing I wanted to kind of loop round on, and it was the idea of a collective work product. Now, I've definitely been in situations where the team had something that they were working together to achieve, but they weren't performing. If you asked them, do you need each other in order to achieve your purpose? They would probably say, well, it's really nice working with each other, and I like the banter. But in your minds, does that make a team if the team aren't delivering but do rely upon those social connections to get the work done? Does that make sense?
Yeah, if you're being very academic about it, you could argue, something there, but I have an experience of a team that was like that, and they actually end up agreeing that, for us, it's about our well-being, supporting each other in our well-being. It is having fun together. It is about learning together. So their work product wasn't probably what I'd have liked, maybe, from terms of, what can you really do together that's going to help. But those are big things too. Those are big things as well. So being slightly less academic about it, there was benefits in them working together as a team in those aspects, but the work product was actually quite separate. But the key thing, as you were saying, is you have to have the conversation about it. and be aware of it and discuss that out. But if there is genuine work product, you're going to get into the real dynamics type stuff, because that other stuff, you don't really get into the dynamics type stuff if it's just about well-being and just about learning together. It's not as hardcore in terms of when you have to really work together and compromise and collaborate, and so yes, it can still be a team, you can argue, but I wouldn't the word real team, but you're getting very academic there, really.
And when we're saying real team here, are we referring to anybody's work in particular? Because I know there is a term real team. Was it Richard Hackman?
Yes, they used that in their 6 conditions work. They talked about one of the, is it a real team? And the stuff that we're talking about, that Lucy talked about, interdependencies, joint work product, that's the stuff they talked about,
Yeah. So from a literature point of view, that's what the literature is saying. It's purpose, it's interdependencies, it's how they work together. But there's lots and different variations of that. And as Paul says, I think it's about the team then having the dialogue to work out, what does it mean for them? And what does a team mean for them? And I have had one team where, we went through a team coaching program. So I had a number of interventions. And at the end, they said, okay, so we are together as a collective because we want to do some thought leadership. They're in a pharma company. And so we want to be there. We want to be leading edge in terms of the thinking we're bringing, but we just don't want to call ourselves a team. So, okay, that's fine. So they were almost really working as a team, but they just said, we don't like the word team, so we don't want to be called a team. So whatever, but they've had the dialogue and they've agreed then, where they do come together as a collective. So that's fine.
And that's the thing. It doesn't really matter if someone's labeling it a team or not, if you're getting those positive effects from it. I mean, just to build a bit of context here for our listeners, what other types of teams that you would both generally work with?
Yeah, I mean, lots of sort of exec teams, senior teams, and then also, we might come on to it all, but also sometimes what is being called in the literature team of teams, but that's basically various teams all that are connected. So we might then work with a number of teams that are sort of connected with each other as well, within an organisation, or sometimes an organisation and then an outside organisation, but they're still teams that are connected. So it could be any of those sort of configurations, really.
That can range, Ben, from an organisation of a couple 100,000 people down to a very small organisation. We do all of that, like so.
And some organisations, one of our clients is 130,000 people, and we've been working with a number of teams in that organisation. So it just it's always varied.
So just to
what I would say as a reflection just was I have one team I'm working with a colleague currently, and it's only 250 people. I use it as a little sort of a test case nearly, and we're working with the senior directors, management team, the 2 management teams below that, and we're recently just done a conference with every single employee about how can we get every single person to collaborate better. So it's kind of like that's where the edge is of how do you really change culture, and through the mechanism of team and collaborating better is probably where the learning edge is in this whole area.
And this is what I find really interesting then. So, and Lucy, you mentioned the word interventions, just so that our listeners are kind of aware of what we mean by interventions. Could you just give a quick, short definition of that?
Yeah, sorry.
It sounds a bit scary,
Sorry, that was a bit jargony. Sorry, that just popped in there. Basically, a session with a team. So, yeah.
And that session could be, so it could be a planned thing or it could be an unplanned thing. What you're saying here is that you as an external entity, as a coach, are choosing to intervene in the mechanics, the ongoing kind of work of that team.
Yeah.
So then if you're in this situation where there are multiple teams and they're all interconnected and they have to, they're all working together in some way, and you want to get that cross-team collaboration happening or whatever it is, I mean, this is a real interesting thread to put on. Because I know a lot of the people that are listening are product coaches, are agile coaches, or are senior leaders in organizations where this is always a problem. And I think that for a long time, when I think of kind of agile coaching, I won't bore you too much of it, I think that there was a lot of promise and not a lot of actual value delivered. And I wonder, like, a lot of the time was because of that inability of teams to embrace the dependencies they have and do something collectively to kind of overcome that. Practically speaking, for our listeners, are there any tips or kind of particular advice you can provide? And how do you get multiple teams kind of working together in a meaningful, valuable way?
I'll let you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a couple of things. One is a metaphorical way. So you're working with a team and you say, how do you bring the rest of the teams into the room? And that can be through, representations of those teams. And that's probably where we started off type thing, doing a lot of that. And then I remember asking Peter Hawkins a question. He's written a lot about team coaching. He had his 70th birthday a few years ago. We were on a call on the same day, and I asked him, what would your 50-year-old self say to you now? And he said, be more courageous. So since that moment, I've been using that, just be more courageous. And being more courageous from this team of teams type thing is actually saying, can we get 2 teams in the room together? Can we get 3 teams in the room together? And actually, instead of making it a paper type exercise, actually getting people in the room together. And I have one example whereby I had 2 teams in a room together, and one was external to the organization, one was internal. And they said they made more progress in 3 hours in 3 years. And that just really, really struck me that, what are we leaving behind by not just getting people, even teams that are external to our organization, in the room together and saying, okay, how can we collaborate better?
Yeah.
And when you do that, things happen. I think we're just being too safe. We're just being far too safe.
Yeah.
And I think being more courageous in that leads to things, because humans have an innate need to collaborate better if you give them the right opportunity to just talk about it.
I mean, knowing you two, right, and if I read between the lines and the courageous thing, and then maybe this is me putting my own kind of lens on it and my own veneer on it a little bit, but I think that the thing I take away from what you said there, Paul, was that you're asking the team, how would they like to collaborate better? You're not coming up with a particular mechanism or format, and I think that's really quite important, and I think something that a lot of people have missed, particularly in the agile world. And I think as well I'm making reference to agile and product. I apologize, Paul and Lucy. I know you're not too au fait with it, but just because I want to talk to the listeners directly on this, I think there's a lot of stuff that people have got wrong because they feel like they are they're the convincers, not the coaches. They're there to convince people that they should work together, and they should convince people that this particular tool is the way that this one will help them kind of overcome all these problems. And I think this is such a stark difference between, I think, how you have taught me and other people how to approach team coaching versus that more kind of authoritative style of intervention.
Yeah. And it's definitely something that team coaches, as you know, Ben, will often have supervisors and they'll go for supervision, and we may will talk more about it. But it's definitely a pattern that I see in supervision is people are bringing with them this feeling of they've got to ensure the team's successful. They've got to help the team to achieve their objectives. And actually in supervision, you explore, well, actually, whose ownership is it? And how do you help the team to take that ownership for it? So I think you're absolutely right. I think it's one of the key differences probably in a team coaching approach is that the ownership will lie with the team.
Yeah, it's yeah. I remember I was doing the coaching course with you both, and somebody gave me some feedback, which was I used somebody's name to kind of bring them into the conversation rather than just kind of asking for team. And the point was that I was more facilitative than coaching. And that's always really stuck with me. And I think back to a workshop I was running last week, actually. And the one thing that I've really stopped doing more and more is anyway thinking that I can help guide people in how they should be talking to each other, how they should work. And if the frame for the conversation is there, if you leave people to it, if they actually want to work together and they see value in it, they'll find a way. And I think that's something that I definitely, I've been on a long journey to not feel like I'm the one that has to kind of make the magic happen when actually the team's probably capable of making that magic happen.
I think on that, Ben, I have this example whereby I remember sitting on the grass, getting eaten by ants in a corporate premises outside London. And the team were all sitting around in a circle on the grass having this conversation. And I was encouraging them that, I want you to own the conversation, to ask each other questions. And this French gentleman started asking these amazing questions of the team. And he turned around to me and he apologized. He said, "Oh, I'm doing your job." I went, no. This is perfect, And it's nearly a little bit of getting out of, creating the conditions for the team to have a conversation that they would never normally have, normally. And for the team coach to get out of the way and to nearly be sitting there going and watching and observing it. And the odd time you might come in and what are you noticing, what's happening? But the more we can get out of the way of the team and let them self-coach is really what the essence of what we're trying to get to.
Yeah. And then it's so much more likely to be sustainable. Then they won't need us there all the time, because they're doing it themselves. Brilliant. So
yeah.
No, and I think that's what we would love. But then I think part of the issue that I've found in my professional career, and I think I was very fortunate because I was able to pick and choose, and it was generally very much a pull rather than me being pushed into situations. And a lot of people that are listening don't operate their business in the same way that we do. And what they find is that they're often pushed into teams rather than it being a pull from the team saying, we know there's a problem, can someone help come and fix it?
Yes.
That for the people that find themselves in that situations where they are pushed on a team, i.e. they are brought into an organisation, they are there on a short-term contract or as a permanent member of staff as some kind of internal coach, and they are told, there's 3 teams over there, go and coach them. What advice would you give to people that find themselves in that push-based team coaching model rather than a pull-based one?
Lucy, have any thoughts on that?
Well, it links with the whole idea of sort of resistance as well, which was sort of one of the challenges sometimes you have in teams of, people feeling like I don't want to be in there, or I don't want to do this work. And that's where obviously if we're working with a team, we'll do one-to-one interviews beforehand to find out what's going on, and you'll get a feel of that. But in the moment, you still might get some of that. And I don't know, Ben, if you came across Alison Hardingham at Henley, but she talked about, I don't know if it, a tutor at Henley, but she talked about almost meeting people in their resistance. So, just talking about the resistance as well, and exploring what's going on, without making it a big deal for them. But people are at choice, aren't they? They can choose when they decide that they want to play a part of it or not. And I can think of one team where actually I had a team member who decided that they weren't going to come, and they were at choice. And so the team then did talk about, and asked them, how do you want us to try to communicate with you about the work we've done or the journey we've done? And so they had that conversation and contracted around that. It's one of the challenges we face.
Yeah, just building on that, I love that. I remember reading those words that Alison Hardingham wrote about meeting the resistance, honouring the resistance. And I've talked about now recently about joining the resistance. So where I had a team who were, we had a couple of team members really, really skeptical, going, I don't think this is going to work. And we're saying, I agree. We a lot of this thing can be wasted, and it's only going to work if you folk in this room commit to making it work and do the hard work of what it is to collaborate. And actually that settled one of those individuals, to settle them right down, because what happened, it wasn't being done to them. They were part of it, and they, and I think it's right to be skeptical. It's right to be skeptical, and let's talk about the skepticism rather than ignoring it.
Yeah.
That lovely saying, whatever doesn't get said. One of my favorite sayings is copied from John Whittington and added words to it. Whatever doesn't get said, acknowledged, or appreciated, will find a way out, often unhelpfully.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was amazing actually at that last session when the individual you'll talk about, Paul, then came to us at the end of that and said, I was really skeptical before, and and actually they were sort of quite critical of the the whole approach, and then said, I get it today, and it shifted. And I was like, brilliant to see.
They've been in business 30, 40 years, probably, type thing. It's been about a while. They've probably seen a lot of iterations of people trying to get people together. And would you not be skeptical? I would be.
Yeah. But the impact of that clicking for them on the rest of the team, you could see had a huge influence as well, because the team were probably much more bought in. But then when it clicked for that person that had been much more resistant, then suddenly they shifted on threefold.
Just a build on that, then, is it think not sometimes you would get somebody who does not, who still stays in the periphery, and actually discussing that with the team and saying, okay, so and so here respectfully doesn't, that can be okay as well. But again, the key thing is discussing it, being open about it, getting it out on the table. I always say, yes, I actually think of this just getting it out on the table. We don't like tables. We always remove all furniture. Just have a circle of chairs or a semicircle of chairs. But when we say the table, we mean a metaphorical table. So.
Yeah, it does take a lot of courage to kind of lean into some of those harder conversations. I mean, I've always been a huge fan of when someone is resisting to say, no, you're right. Because in what they're saying is probably true. Well, it's their truth. Maybe not a shared truth. And I think one of the things I always find interesting to observe in a room, and for me, this really kind of draws a difference between kind of the more kind of traditional style leadership and management and a more coaching type approach, is that when the resistance is articulated, it's met with an answer or someone trying to convince them of a different way or that it will be okay, rather than kind of honouring that, as you were saying, and being courageous and really getting up the table and see exactly where they're coming from, because there probably is some useful information in there. But it's that overwhelming desire to fix it or gloss over it or move on or pretend like it's not a thing. I think it does take a lot of courage. I think for me, that's, some of the big lessons around what it is to be a professional team coach. Is to be able to really do that and remove yourself from the equation in some respects, and rather than trying to solve the problem and understand it a bit more. So I'd love to hear in your own words, because we've spoken around this now. We've got a good idea maybe what teams are, but how would you describe professional team coaching in comparison to, say, individual coaching, or even in comparison to, say, something like facilitation?
Yeah, I'll say about individual coaching, anybody who's experienced individual coaching, normally I'd ask them, was that a one-off coaching session, or was it a journey of a number of sessions? And they'll say, I met the person, the coach, a number of times. So the first thing I always say, it is about a journey. That word can be overused too, but it's about a number of sessions with a team over time. And the reason for that is back to the accountability piece of what's happening in between. Like what happens before the first session, what happens in between the sessions is more important than what happens in the sessions a lot of the times. And then the other thing I'd always say, but I love this, just keep it really simple for people, like helping you have a dialogue with each other that you would never normally have. What are the things being talked about outside of the room? What are the things being talked about in the corridors or on calls with each other that are not getting talked about, that everybody knows needs talked about, but people are too scared to talk about? And that can be about the leadership. It can be about each other, really difficult stuff. And we believe that team coaching is a place. If you take one-to-one coaching, like, everything's on the table, and the conversation there is always about where's the crossover with therapy versus coaching. When it comes to team coaching, you can argue where's the crossover between group therapy and coaching. But it's really getting things on the table in a safe, and even as actually at Henley, I don't know if it was in the cohort you were on, I think it might have been actually. We talked about creating psychological safety for a team, and somebody said, I don't like that term, I like the term psychological courage. And we've been using that a lot recently. How do you create the psychological courage where people can actually just have dialogue about how this team can perform better, if you want to put it really simply?
And I suppose that they need to know what performance is.
Yeah, and that's different probably though for each team. It's like we come across lots of organizations that are performing really well. Like, they're hitting their metrics, or they're doing all that, but people are unhappy, well-being issues, unresolved conflict. So you can, who's it? McGregor and Doshi talk about the intrinsic motivators of why humans work, and the number one reason is play. Work is meant to be joyful, meant to be fun, it's meant to be creative. We've created these workplaces where quite simply sometimes it can be quite depressing.
I think that's the truth for most people, isn't it? I don't know many people, when I speak to them, they turn around and say, my job's fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I had the best time. Like, I hang out with the best people. Everyone pulls their weight. No one ever says that. And maybe it's just because I live in a very sad part of Surrey, I don't know. But like, people don't say that. There's a question which I got from your book, which I believe I got it from your book. I hope I did, because I've always been giving you credit for it.
Well, thank you.
That's okay. And now you'll tell me, that wasn't our question.
Yeah, somebody else's.
You spend my afternoon emailing people saying sorry, which was, I'm going to say this, like, was it your book? What does the future need from this team? Or questions of that effect.
That is one question we ask it.
Yeah. And that question has always stuck with me, because I thought it's such an excellent way to get an understanding of where the individuals in the team feel that they are, where the whole team feel that they are, where the stakeholders feel that team is. I think it's such, for me, a powerful question, and someone that I've probably become over-reliant upon over the years, just because it just makes people think, about so much more than just what's in front of them. So yeah, your book. We're at this kind of just over the midway point. Could you tell people a little bit about your book, because it's a fantastic book and people should go and buy it. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to maybe just explain kind of what it is all about.
Thank you.
Please let you.
Yeah, so the book is based on our model creating the team edge. So that was we developed back in 2015, and we've evolved it and challenged it and etc. Haven't we? We're now writing, Paul, but it's based on that really, and it looks at the 7 characteristics of high performing teams. And we did loads of research. Obviously, wrote 5,000 words in the first book. Of just rewritten as well, probably extended to about 110,000. So we've been writing a lot and researching loads around it, but we came up with then the sort of 7 characteristics of that we felt of top performing teams. But that's just some measures, but actually one of the key things we write about in the book as well is if you want to do team coaching, your way of being is so critical. How you are, how you help hold the room is so important. So the tools, the diagnostics are all very helpful, but they're not the work itself. They support the work. So I think that's what's really important for us to get across, because some people think, oh, you're just because you've got a diagnostic, you've got a model, you've got this tool that means that's what you're wedded to. But we use it to support, and in the book there are lots of different examples of sessions, exercises you can use with teams, but again they're just to support the work. As I said, how you are with the team is the most important thing really, because that helps build that psychological safety and courage and the feeling that the team can start to really have those conversations and explore. So that's very much in essence, but we talk about the latest thinking as well in teams and team coaching, don't we, Paul? I'll pass to you. You can add anything else.
Yeah, well, we literally just finished writing the 2nd edition on the 23rd of December. So that'll come
Congratulations.
out. Thank you. So middle of this year, that'll hopefully come into the market, 2nd edition. And I guess I'm thinking, what are some of the things I come across as really cool research and things that instinctively, but it's really nice when somebody goes away and does a PhD on it or something like that and proves it. That can you, from a technology point of view, if you're just virtual kind of team, can you build up the same sort of connection as a in person? And what they said is yes, you can, but it takes more time. And also that it takes you going vulnerable and going deeper with each other, about sharing about the humanity with each other and making each other human. Like, so we know that from our work, but it's really nice when things like that are proved. So again, it's bringing that to life to people. Because we come across people who are skeptical of that. We love working in person, we do. But we know that you can create really powerful connections working virtually as well. And many teams are global and they don't get to meet each other. And it's are very irregularly. So, and it goes across culture as well. It's fascinating.
Yeah, no, really. I mean, first of all, if I had £1 for every time I think you said it's a really cool piece of research, Paul, I think I could probably retire by now.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you're so academically minded in that respect. But also then, and before we kind of talk about the creating team edge model, perhaps in a bit more detail, because there's a number of different phases to it, which I'd love you to share with our listeners. Picking up on the remote thing here, in your experience and from what you've been reading, is it the same skills that a coach requires to kind of create that deeper connection in a remote environment? Or is it a new set of skills which needs to be built?
I mean, you'll probably talk about the phases, Paul, won't you? But it is, in essence, it's the same skills. And obviously, that we now, across the different professional bodies in coaching, now have some competencies as well that have been written up around it. And so you look at, if you compare across them as well, so obviously we're very involved in one of those bodies, but if you look across the different bodies, actually, the commonality is very much there. So really similar skills in terms of that whole way of being, your approach, how you hold the room, and that's so important whether it's in person or virtually. The ability to connect, get people feeling safe, that they can start to explore. That you're clear in terms of the agreements of how you're going to work together, what's okay, what's not okay, and all of that piece is so important. And how you use questioning and that you're shifting that ownership. So all of those things are really important, whether it's virtual, in person, a bit of both, and we do a bit of both as well sometimes. I've got to say it's not the easiest, but we do it. So, and sometimes, as Paul says, you're working with global teams that are literally across every different time zone, and having to just think about that. So it's just about being human, being ourselves, and remembering that someone might be in LA and it's 7 a.m. in the morning, and someone else is in Hong Kong and it's the evening, and you just try and remember that people have got different energy levels. So it's thinking about all those things in terms of the environment people are exploring in and are working in, and just helping them to start to feel more comfortable to have those conversations.
Really simple stuff like Lucy mentioned there about you come into a lunch break, you don't say let's be back at 2 p.m. because there's maybe 5 time zones. So let's be back in 1 hour's time on the hour. It's simple language and checking in with what did people have for breakfast and lunch, and just making it very human, because we've had people, sounds awful, but we had to go on time from a totally different time zone on a training program, and one individual was just full of life and just very buoyant, and the other person's really struggling to stay awake because they were so tired because they're up all night. I'm actually doing a team coaching session in a few weeks' time. Myself and a colleague, we're working through the night because the team are in Japan.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's one of our clients, isn't it? Yeah.
Last year we were in Tokyo in person. This year we're doing that. We're in person with them later on this year in London. So, and that particular team has got interpreters. So we're using interpreters to help with language barriers. So that's not my Northern Irish accent, because I guess just to be for the record.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, fascinating. I mean, how does it work with interpreters? I mean, that must slow down the speed of the communication.
Well, my admiration, they use an application called Interpretify, and it's not it's a technology whereby it's actually live interpreters in the background.
Okay.
So as I speak in English, somebody is interpreting that into Japanese.
Yeah.
And then as somebody in Japanese speaks, that automatically the interpreter, and the interpreters every 20 minutes they change over, and I don't know, it's a superpower or a super skill they have. How can they listen?
Yeah.
Speak at the same. I don't know. I'm mystified by it. Mystified.
And I ran a session for that team within their whole functional global team. I ran a session at the end of last year, and so we had 150, all with different languages, and we were running it in English, but then they had their Interpretify going in the background, and just remembering that you're asking people to think about things, do things, and remembering that that's got to be translated, and how is the translation exact as well. So just remembering that, one, it's going to take more time for them to be able to process it because of the translation, and the instructions got to be really simple. So even in team coaching, you just got to be so clear on helping people with instructions, and so they know, and we're trying to send stuff out in advance. Just all juggling all those things.
Yeah, guys, it's bananas. I can't. Yeah, it's really. I'd love to be a fly on the wall, and that sounds phenomenal. But I also know we are kind of rapidly running out of time. This is time slipping through our fingers. I would love it if you wouldn't mind just giving a bit of an overview of your model, of your approach. Because I've used it a number of times, always got a lot of value from doing it. Love it, because I think it's really useful for the coaches or aspiring coaches who are listening to this to hear about it, because it structures it, I think, in a very nice way. So would you mind just explaining the 5 phases of the Creating Team Edge model?
So Lucy, do you want to go through the characteristics? I mentioned the 5 sort of things in.
Well, I'll do the characteristics like super speedy. So we may have written 85,000 words on them, and I'll do it in I don't know, you can time me a few seconds. But basically, there are 7 characteristics then that we write about in the book of top performing teams. And they are, and this is not linear, so it doesn't have to be in this order, but it's purpose, that team's got some purpose, and that links to strategy, objectives. The team explore their identity. So who they are, how they want to be known and described as a team, that they explore their values and beliefs as a team. So what do they need to value and believe in order to achieve that purpose and their strategy and objectives? And what are some of the limiting beliefs, obviously, that sit within that as well? And then the 4 other areas are awareness. So it's how aware are the team of how they interact with each other and their strengths and preferences, but also how aware are they of how they interface with other teams and within the wider organisation. Relatedness is all about the team's ability to connect with each other, build relationships, build trust, and really important, their ability to have open and honest conversations. So we're not working with one single team that's not trying to improve their ability to have open and honest conversations. And then ways of working is how they make their meetings, how they make their decisions. And last but not least is transformation. So that's about where the team gets their energy from, so their sort of resilience as a team, and how they learn from their behaviours and their patterns, but also how they innovate and grow for the future and not become complacent as a team.
Yeah, that's one of my favourite ones, actually. So I just it took me a while to really get it embedded in my head about what that transformation aspect was about, but I think it's really, really important and so often overlooked. And it's I think it always reminded me what you said earlier, about teaching the team, almost teaching the team how to coach themselves and kind of giving them that ability to then transform is brilliant. So let me just do a quick recap, see if I wrote this down in the correct order. Yeah, well, I kind of, I've looked at the model a lot, so this should all be. I shouldn't need to look at what I've just written down. But there was purpose, identity, values and beliefs, awareness, relatedness, ways of working, and transformation.
Perfecto.
Yeah, well done.
Great.
And then we're talking probably there's then we talk like 5 phases type thing of like a team coaching sort of journey or session. So we also about pre-team coaching. So is team coaching actually beneficial? Is it a real team? Does it want to be a real team? And having not just assuming because somebody asked you to work with a team that you're going to do that. So having that conversation. The second part, once you decide, okay, we're going to do some work together, is then what we call discovery. And that's about trying to find out what's really going on. And the different ways of doing that would be obviously information that's available about various things that the team have gathered before, but one-to-one interviews, we love little 30-minute one-to-one interviews just over Zoom or Teams, and we've got a range of questions we ask in and around the 7 characteristics and other questions. And one of our favorite questions to ask at the end is like, is there anything we need to know that you want to share with us, either privately or more publicly, about how you do your best work? Things like neurodiversity, things like that can be shared in that, and other things might be shared or might not be shared. We also do a Team 360 diagnostic, whereby we get the team, the direct reports to the team, whoever other stakeholders, maybe a more senior person in the organisation, to fill in a 360 type questionnaire. So we call that the discovery phase, of really finding out what's really going on. And that's before we ever get to the next stage, which is basically then what we call co-design. The third stage where we go along, well, if we're going to do work together, what does that look like? Based on the information that we've gathered, what does that look like? And that takes place with the team leader, but also with the team. So even if we design the first session, for example, with the team leader, once we get into the room with the team, then we're checking with the team, is this the work we want to do together? And something more important might emerge in that day that you go that direction. And then lastly, you get into the actual interventions, and that can be, a number of sessions in person. It can be via virtually. It can be a mixture of both. And then it can be one-to-one coaching in the background, supporting team members. So it's not just to think of interventions as just being with the team. It can be a number of things. An evaluation, is it working? What's happening? So those 5 phases, it's not sequential. You're always discovering. You're always asking, should we be doing this work? The pre-bit. You're always co-designing. Interventions is always happening. The work taking place in between, and you're always evaluating. So it's not sequential, but it is like 5 phases that are always moving about. And we've looked for another book we were writing for Becoming a Team Coach, is another book we've been involved in, coming out this year as well. And in that, we looked at David Clutterbuck's work, looked at Peter Hawkins' work, and they all broadly fit into those 5 types. They've got different names for it, but you can put most people's down into those sort of 5 big buckets of, what's the work? Do we need to do work together or not? How do we discover what's going on? How do we co-create together, co-design? Let's do the work. Let's evaluate.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because I think of so many people that I know, and the first 3 phases are often just they haven't got time, or they don't feel like they're permitted to do that. And then the evaluation phase is their contract renewed, or
Yeah.
what's that end of year review like? You know,
Yeah.
it's really interesting. I think that the pre-team coaching, making sure that they actually then want to kind of go on this journey with you, the discovery work, and then moving into that co-design, that co-creation of a
Yeah.
plan, but as a team. There's not something that's been forced upon people, but they're part of doing it. They've got skin in the game. It's their plan as much as it is your plan. Then carrying out the various interventions, and then the evaluation, or even ongoing evaluation as you go. You know, I think it's just a lovely way to structure it, and it's nice to hear that other approaches kind of fit into that as well.
Totally.
And I kind of wish that, I don't know, we had another 45 minutes, because I would like to. No, I'd love to hear how your thinking has evolved or not evolved since rewriting the second edition of the book and this other book you've been contributing towards. But I also think my listeners would love to learn more about the phases and the model itself and understanding about purpose. So we won't do it today, but I would love to get you back on at some point in the next couple of months to do a deep dive on some of it, because it's just I think it's really, really valuable. Maybe we could time it for when the new version of your book comes out.
Love to.
It would be a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Ben.
Excellent. Well, honestly, it's been great. I could listen to you both all day. It's just been such an honour to have you in this kind of podcasty type context, because you are.
You're very kind. You're very kind.
Thank you. Well, it's such a pleasure to have a conversation.
Yeah. No, it's lovely. I wish maybe we could even find a way to do the next conversation face to face.
Yeah,
perhaps. Let's see.
Yeah,
Let's
happy
see.
to.
We're going to have to bring this conversation to an end for this episode, but we'll get you back for another. If people want to find out more information about you, obviously there is LinkedIn, and we'll put your LinkedIn links into the show notes. What other websites should listeners be going to check out to learn more about you and the work that you do, your book, etc.?
So definitely us, obviously, but also Performance Edge. .co.uk, and obviously we're tutors at Henley, as you know, as well. So any of those websites, anywhere else, Paul?
Yeah, well, I always love just LinkedIn to send people send a message, say hello, and send to say met you on Ben's podcast, and
nice.
Like to ask you a question.
Well, everyone take that as an invitation.
Yeah, no, we're
really happy.
We love hearing people. We were genuinely.
We do.
Brilliant. Well, I'll put a link to Performance Edge. I'll put a link to Henley, some of the courses you do at Henley as well, so people can check that out. And we'll put your LinkedIn links into the show notes. And that just needs to say again, thank you so much. It was it's seriously fantastic to have you on here. And I don't think I'll ever stop learning from you both, as long as you keep doing what you're doing. So thank you for making this time.
Thank you. That was just a pleasure. Thank you.
Good. And everyone, thank you for listening. Your continued listenership is what keeps this podcast going. We've been going now for probably maybe 3 years. I think we're over 250 episodes, still endeavouring to do one episode a week, which is a lot when you're trying to factor in training and coaching and consulting as well. But it's knowing that there's a few hundred people that listen to this on a weekly basis is what keeps me going. So everyone, thank you very much for listening. Again, Paul and Lucy, thank you very much for coming on. This has been a Product Agility Podcast, and we'll be back again next week.
Thank you.